Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony Lonston. I just want to start by saying it's really been an honor and a privilege to work with the PHA organization, and look forward to becoming or being the chair, the incoming chair at this point in time. So I hope everyone, so is everyone enjoying the conference so far, hopefully? Good, yes. Before we begin our luncheon, I want to highlight some of the great opportunities available to you at conference this year. First, have you had a chance to stop by the exhibit hall? Hopefully you have. Be sure to check it out this afternoon from 1 to 5:45. While you're there, remember to stop by the PHA Resource Center, talk to our volunteers, and pick up some great resources while you're there. So. I'm pleased to announce PHA's Advocacy Challenge for conference this year. Our goal is to send 500 messages to Congress in support of PHA's top priority bill called the Safe Step Act. This bill protects patient access to the treatment recommended by their healthcare team by requiring an exception to insurance step therapy policies. Pardon me. Safe Step Act, has until the end of year to be passed by Congress, or next year we'll have to restart the process for support for this bill from zero once again. Take out your phone now if you can, and go to the news items section of the conference app to find the link to PHA's email template, or you can also find it in our Advocacy Action Center, phaassociation.org/advocate. It takes just 2 minutes to fill out your information and tell your legislators why this bill matters to our community. Help us meet our goal of 500 messages and make sure this important bill becomes law. And make sure you stop by the art gallery. If you didn't see it outside, there's an art gallery set up out there. Nice small pieces of art. I was just there this morning. There's some incredible pieces by some talented individuals here in our own community. They're all from our community. You can purchase tickets to bid on the pieces of art, each of the individual pieces of art. Tickets are only $5 each, and they are on sale today until 6 p.m. So please take advantage of that. The Journeys Lunch has been part of the PHA's conference since the very beginning in 1994. Today, we have invited 3 individuals who are personally affected by PH and a member of each of their healthcare teams to tell us more about their shared journey with PH. From diagnosis to the challenges of treatment to finding their hope for the future. As you'll see, each of these relationships is unique, but together they reflect how much PH is truly a shared journey that includes patients, caregivers, and medical professionals. We highlight just these 3 stories, but we know there are so many journeys and stories in the audience that each one is unique. I've met a few people here in the past couple of days, and I've heard some amazing stories, so you're about to hear some more. Next, I'd like to please join me in welcoming Melissa Wilson to moderate our panel today. Melissa is a nurse practitioner, clinical operations director at Pulmonary Hypertension Coordinated and Pulmonary Hypertension Program Coordinator for Advanced Lung Disease at Advent Health in Orlando. Recently, she was promoted to the Advent Health Medical Group Advanced Practice Provider Director of Medical Specialty Service Line. That's a mouthful. She also serves on the Advent Health Cardiovascular Institute Clinical Council as the Advanced Practice Provider Leader. She has held many leadership positions in the Pulmonary Hypertension Association, including Board of Trustee member and chair of PHPN. Melissa and I joined the board right around the same time. And Melissa, I lived in Orlando for 15 years, so I knew Melissa. She's a wonderful person. So in 2020, she completed her Doctor of Nursing practice from Duke University. She is a member of the Duke School of Nursing, Nurse Alumni Council, and is guest lecturer for the Duke School of Nursing. Dr. Wilson also has a strong research interest and acts as principal or sub-investigator on several clinical trials. She has published articles, written abstracts, and presented at numerous medical congresses. Please welcome Dr. Melissa Wilson. Hope you don't need it.
Hello, everyone. A little smaller than Tony, so I'm going to drop the mic here. It is my honor to facilitate this afternoon's Journey panel. Thank you, Tony, for that very kind introduction. I want to give the panelists as much time as possible to share their stories, so let's jump in. Our first panelist pair is Dr. Michelle Liu and Stephen Walker. Dr. Michelle Fernand Liu is educated in the 8th-year program of liberal medical education at Brown University in Rhode Island. She obtained her Master's of Public Health degree at Harvard University with a concentration in international health. Dr. Liu is currently practicing otolaryngology, head and neck surgery at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. She also trained and mentored over 200 healthcare professionals in effective communication and leadership. Dr. Liu has been an advocate for children and families diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension as leader of the Mid-Atlantic Pediatric Pulmonary Hypertension Support Group since 2014. Her daughter, Esther, diagnosed at age 2, is a double lung transplant recipient in 2014 and has traveled with her mother to international conferences to speak to physicians and families about her pre- and post-transplant experience. Stephen Walker received his undergraduate education in nursing at Newcastle upon Tyne Polytech in the United Kingdom. He moved to the USA in 1984 and worked in the PICU for about 15 years. During that time, he earned a master's degree in parent-child nursing, followed by postmaster certification for pediatric nurse practitioner. He worked in a pediatric cardiology practice for about 7 years prior to joining the pulmonary hypertension teams at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in 2009. At CHOP, Steve supports the PH team, which includes 4 physicians, 2 NPs, nurse coordinators, and a section administrator. Steve also helps run a small number of programs at the Chesapeake Bay Kids for PH, heart-lung, and heart-lung transplant. He is also an active in the M.P.H net nurse group. Steve lives just outside Philadelphia in the Garden State with his husband Melvin, Charlie, a cockapoo, and Jasmine, a Callaloo cat. Our second panelist pair is Allison Dsouza and Elizabeth Colglazier. Allison Dsouza, B.S.N, RN, was diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension in 2015. After being a patient and shadowing her nurse practitioner at UCSF, she dreamed of being a nurse. She graduated from UCLA's School of Nursing in 2020 and moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to be a nurse for people with advanced lung disease and lung transplant. She is now a cardiac ICU nurse at UPMC's Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, where she cares for children and adults with congenital heart diseases. She hopes one day to follow in the footsteps of her amazing PH team and become a nurse practitioner for children with PH. I'm sure Allison's going to achieve this. Elizabeth earned her bachelor's degree of science in nursing from the University of Virginia and her master's of science in nursing at the University of California, San Francisco. She has over 15 years of experience as a nurse and has been working as a pediatric nurse practitioner in pediatric pulmonary hypertension at UCSF Bethesda Children's Hospital for the last 7 years. She has spoken nationally and internationally on pediatric pulmonary hypertension and has participated in multiple research studies. In her spare time, Elizabeth enjoys spending time with her husband and 2 children. My next group of panelists includes Kim Jackson and Ms. Evelyn Mitchell. Kim Jackson has been a cardiac nurse for 28 years. She's been working for the University of Kentucky, and she is an avid UK fan, I will tell you. Gilhart and Vascular Institute in 2010, at which time she began helping out with pulmonary hypertension patients. In 2015, she accepted the position of pulmonary hypertension coordinator. Kim has been an active member of PHA, PHPN since 2015. She attended her first symposium in 2015. After her second symposium in 2017, she was motivated to take a more active role with PHPN and join the Education Committee. She served as Education Committee Chair from 2018 to 2020. We went back in time, sorry guys. Currently, she is the Chair-elect for PHPN and is a member of the Board of Trustees. One of her greatest joys is educating the community about PH because she feels it is the key to improving patient outcomes. She appreciates all of her patients and is devoted to assuring that they will receive the best care possible. And last but not least, Evelyn Mitchell is the PH support group leader for Lexington, Kentucky area. She works closely with PHA to provide support and have meetings for the members. Evelyn was diagnosed with PAH in December of 2017. She was placed on IV meds at the time and has since transitioned to oral medications that are keeping her PAH stable. In her spare time, she likes to read, spend time with her 3 grandchildren, and swim. In addition, she is a CASA, which is a court-appointed special advocate for abused and neglected children in the court system. What an amazing job. Please join me in a round of applause and thanks for the panelists. So now let's get started with our first panelists, Dr. Liu and Stephen.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It is so awesome to see this wonderful audience and to be on the stage, honestly, for the first time. I remember my first conference was in 2014, and I was sitting in your seat as a parent with a relatively newly diagnosed pediatric patient who's sitting here in the front, but I won't put her on the spot. Her name is Esther. You can say hi later. So I have a few minutes to tell my story, and it's a long story, as you can imagine, but I'll try to keep it brief. As was mentioned, I am a physician, which is part of my story. As a mother of 3 children, Esther is my middle child, and she was 2 years old when she was diagnosed actually in the Netherlands. So we were living in Florida when she was born. She was born in Jacksonville, Florida, and as a military family, we moved to Italy in the summer of 2012. We were on vacation in Holland in October of that year, only for 4 days, and on the last day, she had a cardiac arrest right in front of me after jumping on a trampoline. And so as you can imagine, as a mother witnessing this, it was very shocking, and she was resuscitated and fast forward diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension, which was a very new diagnosis. I had, even as a physician, not known much about it. And she received outstanding care in the Netherlands for 6 weeks and was pretty much on life support as we planned to return to the States. When we got here, PHA was my source of information. I have to say, this organization was a wealth of information for me, as was Facebook, I will say. I've gained a lot of experience through connecting on Facebook, but this organization was the primary source of my information, which was like drinking from a fire hose, to say the least. We attended our first conference in 2014 after she had been listed for a lung transplant. And I found the connections with mainly caregivers at that time, some of whom are parents here in this audience, and some of the children here became our friends, PH friends, when Esther was only 4 years old. And she received her transplant 1 month after attending her first conference. So, in short, I have to say that the connections that you make at this conference are not something to sneeze at. They're no pun intended, you know. We don't like sneezing these days. The connections you make here are invaluable. And the hope that you get from being at this conference is significant. And I think of 3 H's when I tell my story. It's important that you're heard as a patient. Part of our story is that at times we didn't feel like we were heard. And I know as a physician, and now going through this as a caregiver, to be heard is very important. When you have concerns about symptoms or even just questions, make sure that you're heard. Another H is hope. We hear all the time. Find hope wherever you need to find it, whether it's at this conference, support groups, on Facebook. Find your hope. That will get you through this experience as much as you are able. And ask for help when you need it. And that's how I'm going to segue to my partner here, Steve Walker. He was our nurse practitioner in the in the cardiology clinic at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in 2013.
From day one.
When we began our journey, and he now is our literal friend and supporter, even though we don't see him on a regular basis. We're back in his clinic annually for checkups, but he has been a true supporter, and I've at times reached out to him for help. So those are my H's. Feel like you're heard, make sure you're heard, continue to sustain your hope, and ask for help when you need it. And I'm going to hand it over to Steve.
Thank you. I don't know if my...
Thank you.
I have to stand up a little bit to look at this slide and see what, wow, they put all 4 bullet points up. Okay. So, Michelle told you this story up until now. I'm going to start back in 2013, which is, I think I was the first person that actually met you in the cardiology clinic, which was part of the comprehensive lung transplant evaluation. I know some of you have been through that. It can be a pretty daunting process. But Michelle and Esther and the rest of the families, their wait was not very long. I only saw Esther in my clinic twice before her transplant. So that's a very short period of time to wait in pediatric lung transplant. But even since then, even though Esther hasn't been in our clinic for many visits since then, there's always been this communication between myself and the family. I don't like to just say Michelle because I get all the Facebook pictures of all the family and the 2 graduations yesterday before she got down here. So even after that time and after the transplant, Michelle was always very open about reaching out and saying, what do you think about this? I'm concerned about that. And even though I'm not part of the actual transplant team, I was able to be there to help them get through. Michelle is probably the staunchest advocate for Esther and her family and other patients' families that she is involved with. In the hospital, the one thing that really stands out is this one thing. I don't know if Michelle remembers this, was when she was having trouble communicating with the transplant team. And their answer was always, oh, well, we have a protocol and this is how we do things after transplant. And Michelle was like, well, my daughter's not a protocol. And I was there to help point her in the right direction, get the right person to come back and talk to her so that those questions were heard and the answers were given. Her other hat as a support group leader brings her into contact with many other families, and she is also a staunch advocate for all of those families, many of whom you know Michelle, and Michelle knows you, of helping others through this journey as well. And has actually referred patients our way when they've had questions that their home teams could not answer. So we have that connection as well. Third thing is this, communication is two-way. I mean, Michelle will call and ask ask my opinion. We'll talk very frankly about things and sometimes about people, but we don't do that too much. And this picture, actually, I can't see it from here, but first thing, I think I need a new jacket because I think it's the same one that I'm wearing right now. This was actually taken in the Netherlands in 2019, I think it was. 2018. And it's the story about how we came to be there at the same time is that the European Pediatric Society have a pulmonary hypertension conference every other year in Groningen in the Netherlands. And that is where the hospital is that Esther was taken to when she was ill. So long story short, Michelle said, oh, we're going on vacation to Europe. And I said, oh, I'll be in Groningen. And she said, when is it? And the next thing I know, she's at the conference as a speaker. She contacted the doctor that had taken care of Esther, who was the conference organizer, and we all showed up and had a great time. And then the last thing, and anyone that knows Michelle knows that faith is the one thing that it always has impressed me. Michelle's faith has been steadfast throughout this whole journey and basically undergirds everything that she does for her family and for others. That's that.
Thank you.
Thank you both for that. Thank you, Dr. Liu and Stephen, for sharing your unique journey. I think one of the beautiful things to take away from that is never underestimate the value of the relationships that you build here at PHA. Even myself and my profession, I think yesterday I was sharing a story about attending my first PHPN conference in 2007 and met my mentor there. And within minutes, someone else walked up and said, hey, you're my mentor. And that's just amazing how these relationships have built and paid forward. So never underestimate that from a patient perspective, a caregiver perspective, or a healthcare professional. Thank you both. Let's give them a round of applause. Now it's time to move on to our second panel, Allison Dsouza and Elizabeth Colglazier. Did I do it right that time? All right, okay.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having us. We're very excited to be able to share our story. And I say our story because it really is. I wouldn't be the same without her. So my diagnosis story started in 2015. I was a senior in high school, and slowly I was losing the ability to keep up with my peers. Something in my body would just tell me to stop and take a break. At that point, I couldn't walk to my car. I couldn't walk to get my horse. I couldn't ride my horse without having a pre-syncopal event. So one day, my biology teacher said something about heart murmurs and how people with severe heart murmurs would have difficulty walking to their cars. And at that point, I was pretty non-functional. My pediatrician said, we'll run some lab tests, but if everything comes back normal, we're just gonna focus on exercising more and sleeping more. Fortunately, things came back very abnormal, and 2 weeks later, I found myself in a cardiologist's office, and he was telling me that I had pulmonary hypertension and that I needed to go to UCSF immediately. I was more focused on school at that point and said, but wait, I have an English presentation that I need to go to. And he said, well, considering that you walked in here, I think you'll be able to walk out of here, but you need to go to UCSF immediately after. So I proceeded to give the worst English presentation of my entire life. but then went to UCSF where I were to spend the next 9 days in the cardiac ICU.
And I first met Allison the morning after her first cardiac catheterization. I was then a nurse practitioner in the pediatric cardiac ICU, and we were rounding on Allison at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and some resident or fellow is describing this young woman with very severe pulmonary hypertension who had a near arrest in the cath lab last night. And I remember peeking into her room and seeing this young woman sitting in a hospital chair with a hospital tray table in front of her, spread out with books, clearly studying for something. And I remember thinking two things. First, this girl does not look like what was just described to me in rounds. And second, she is clearly not going to let this disease or diagnosis stop her from doing anything. So a few months later, I transitioned out of the cardiac ICU and actually into the role of the nurse practitioner with the pediatric pulmonary hypertension program and got to spend some more time with Allison.
So I showed up to a routine clinic visit, and my nurse practitioner at the time, Emma Olson, she was tearfully telling me that she was going to pursue a different opportunity and that Elizabeth would be taking over for her. And I was absolutely heartbroken. Emma had been there throughout my diagnosis, and I had grown so emotionally attached to her, I couldn't fathom someone else being a part of this journey. But that quickly faded, and Elizabeth and I's relationship just grew starting at that point. In attempts for her to get me not to work a part-time job during college, she offered to let me shadow her for the summer, and that's when I first decided that I actually wanted to pursue nursing.
So we had reassured Allison's dad that it was okay to go to college in Southern California and transitioned her to an adult PH team in LA. And she called up one day saying, I'm thinking about becoming a nurse practitioner, but I'm gonna work part-time as a medical assistant in college. And I said, well, Allison, if you really want to become a nurse practitioner, why don't you just come shadow us and see what we do every day? So professionally speaking, I can't get a higher compliment than having Allison spend a few weeks with me and seeing what I do every single day and deciding ultimately that that's what she wants to do, to become a nurse and ultimately hoping to become a nurse practitioner. I never had any doubt that Allison's ability to attend nursing school or to graduate from nursing school. She is one of the most determined and strong-willed people I have ever met. I also knew that Allison would be a phenomenal nurse in part because of her experience as a patient. That my patients and the parents of my patients love to meet Allison because she is their hope that their children one day will graduate from high school, graduate from college, and start their first job.
I had gotten into UCLA's School of Nursing, and at orientation, I was on continuous oxygen. They sent me an email saying that they didn't think I would be a good fit for their program because of my condition, but they were going to give me the benefit of the doubt and let me start the program. I proved them all wrong when I graduated at the top of my class in 2020. Okay, the tears can't start right now. We still have like 4 more minutes, so we're going to try to keep this. But unfortunately, that was the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and I couldn't find a job as a new nurse in California. I applied to all of the major pulmonary hypertension centers across the country and found myself at a job interview for UPMC Presbyterian in a lung transplant and advanced lung disease floor. I texted the amazing Patty George at that point and said, I got this job, do you think it's a good idea? And she said that she used to work there and she thought it would be great for me. So I packed my bags, moved across the country to a place where I didn't even know was on the map, and started a job where I learned so much about the post-transplant life for pulmonary hypertension patients. After about a year, I transitioned to my dream job in the pediatric cardiac ICU, where I've been for the past 8 months. And that was the first time I actually realized how serious of a disease pulmonary hypertension is. These kiddos can flip a switch in seconds, and they're really the scariest kids that we can see on our floor. Which kind of brings us to our first point that we came up with.
So through our journey, we definitely learned so much from each other, but wanted to highlight a few things. That it is crucial to treat the patient and not the disease. Instead of focusing on Allison's diagnosis and her pulmonary hypertension, we really prioritized what her life goals and wishes were. Our team figured out how we could help her achieve them within reason. From going to college in Southern California to continuing horseback riding, we really wanted Allison to continue on with her life and the future that she had envisioned.
As a provider, if one of my patients with severe pulmonary hypertension said that they wanted to move across the country with no social support, or if they wanted to play polo, one of the most dangerous sports known to man, I would be absolutely horrified. On the other hand, as a patient, I know this disease sets so many limitations on us, and I don't know how much time I have left with this disease. So really, I want to spend every moment living life to the fullest and living up to my dreams. And then the next point we came up with are providers are human too. Some of the most impactful parts of my journey include a bedside nurse crying at my bedside, worried about how this disease was going to affect my life, and me just sitting there trying to console her, not knowing anything about what the future was going to hold for me. I remember Dr. Feynman at the time, during my first 6-minute walk test, was tearing up because I could barely hit 250 meters. Elizabeth and Claire have been such a phenomenal part of my journey, from supporting me through graduating nursing school, all the way to eating lemon bars, stress eating, despite all of these awful test results that I just got. They have been such an amazing part of my journey, and without them, I wouldn't be the nurse I am today, I wouldn't be the patient I am today, and I'm just forever thankful for that.
Every time Allison has had a graduation from high school or college or started a new job, we've been so proud and so happy for her. And every time she's had a setback in her disease or it's progressed, we are heartbroken for her. I'm not sure where this journey is going to take us, but we do know we're in this journey together.
Thank you, Allison and Elizabeth, for sharing your unique journey. I think the big takeaway point is never stop living. No matter what you're experiencing, no matter what you are faced with, just never stop living. And for us as healthcare professionals to help you get there and not focus on what it is we think you can't do, and do everything we can to help you achieve what you can do. So, excellent. Now it's time to move on to our third and last panelists, Jim Jackson and Evelyn Mitchell.
Thank you, Melissa. When I started thinking about my PH journey, 3 words came to mind: passion, caring, and commitment. And my passion for caring, for advocating for PH patients came primarily from my patients. They're such an inspiration to me, but also the PH team and the PH community as a whole has really inspired me in this journey. Specifically, our physicians, the way they love and care for our patients, it shines through every day when we're in clinics. And the PHA, PHPN provided an avenue for me to pursue my passion through my work on the education committee, first as a member, and as Melissa mentioned, then I became the committee chair. And currently, as chair-elect and a part of the Board of Trustees, it just helps me to continue to have an impact on the mission to extend and improve the lives of those affected by PH. But I want to talk specifically about a patient that has really had an impact on me. And there have been many, but I want to focus on Evelyn. And she's going to be sharing her journey with you, so I don't want to take away from what she's going to say. But I met Evelyn in December of 2017, and she was referred to our cardiologist for increased shortness of breath. And she'd been dealing with this for some time and had undergone all sorts of workup. And when she was referred to us, she was referred from a pulmonologist who had already initiated oxygen, but he just couldn't really get to the real root of the cause of her symptoms. So we performed an echocardiogram, and it suggested pulmonary hypertension. So we moved on to the right heart catheterization. And when After that, it was significant. She had the diagnosis was confirmed that she had pulmonary hypertension. We treated her aggressively with upfront triple therapy. She was on IV therapy, Belletri, and before her discharge, we repeated her right heart cath, and she had already started to show some improvement. At her first post-discharge appointment, she reported that her symptoms had improved significantly, and she was able to perform her activities of daily living more comfortably. She had significant improvement after 18 months. Her echocardiogram improved. Her therapy, we were able to transition her from IV therapy to oral therapy, and she has just thrived ever since. She's become an active member. She became an active member of our support group and is currently our support group leader. And she took a trip to Hawaii, which is on my bucket list. She beat me to it. And she's just doing a great job as our support group leader. So stories like Evelyn's story really inspire me, and they make my journey with PH so meaningful. And I often tell people that I didn't choose PH. PH chose me. When I first started working at the University of Kentucky, I knew nothing about pulmonary hypertension. But this community is just, it takes you in and you become a family. And I've met people from all over, clinicians, patients, and they've shared their story. They have just been such a significant part of where I am today. And so I want to end with this thought from Ephesians 2:10. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. I was reading my daily scripture yesterday, and that was the scripture, and I thought how appropriate for this moment and this time, because that describes all of you all. So I'm going to pass this on to Evelyn now.
Thank you, Kim. My journey actually began in 2013. My journey began in 2013. I was still working. I worked at Toyota Motor Manufacturing in Georgetown, Kentucky. And I was used to being on my feet, walking all over the plant. But in the year before that, I had taken a job where I was sitting down a lot. But I noticed that after I would walk around for a period of time, I would get short of breath. Well, I kind of chalked it off to being out of shape, overweight, whatever, nothing to be concerned about. In 2014, I retired from Toyota, and during the next 6 months, the symptoms that I was experiencing became worse. I couldn't breathe to do anything. Every time I would get up out of a chair and walk anywhere, I would have to stop and get my breath. I also had increased fatigue. So I mentioned this all to my doctor, who referred me to a pulmonologist. I spent 2.5 years with a pulmonologist. He ran every test that he could think of to run, put me on oxygen, took me off oxygen. One 6-minute walk test said that I needed oxygen. The next one, I didn't need oxygen. And by the middle of 2017, he told me that I was an enigma and that he didn't know what was wrong with me. So he told me that I needed pulmonary rehab. Well, I knew something was wrong. I know my body, and I know something was wrong. So I went home and scoured every test result that I could find with results. And I came across a notation that on one of my scans, they had noted that I had calcification of the artery. So my rheumatologist has a good friend who's a cardiologist who specializes in women's heart health. So I contacted her to get a referral to the cardiologist. Got that appointment. Cardiologist changed some of my blood pressure meds around, looked at my results of the scans, and assured me that I was fine, that there was really nothing wrong. and that I needed to go to cardiac rehab. Well, at this point, I broke down, and I said, "You're not hearing me. No one is hearing me. No one's listening to what I'm saying. I know my body, and I know that there's something wrong." And at that point, she said, "Okay, I hear you, and I'm listening. So let's run another echo." So she sent me that afternoon for an echo, and the next morning she called me apologizing that there was something terribly wrong, that she suspected I had pulmonary hypertension, and she referred me to the pulmonary hypertension clinic at UK, where I met Kim and Dr. Colglazier. I had a right heart cath and spent the next 13 days in the hospital under the care of Dr. Colglazier and Kim as they transitioned me to Velletri IV. I stayed on Velletri for 8 months, and my line started to come out, and we were at a support group meeting, and I asked Dr. Colglazier, would we ever think about going ahead and pulling the line out? It was trying to come out anyway, and transition to oral meds. And at that point, he agreed that we could do that. So here I am today. On doing well, I'm on 3 therapies. I take Orenitram, Opsumit, and Sildenafil. Those drugs have made a big difference in my life. I can do things that I couldn't do for 3 years, like swim and do things with my grandchildren. So anything that you take away from my story is that you've got to be your own advocate. You can't take no for an answer when you know something's wrong. If you don't advocate for yourself, no one else is going to. Had I not advocated for myself and refused to take no for an answer, I probably wouldn't be here today. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Kim and Evelyn, for sharing your unique journey. And Evelyn, you really summed it up well. The power of advocacy for yourself is really what this organization is all about. This is why it started with the women and their caregivers around that table in Sarasota, Florida, to get people together, to know you're not alone, and bring us healthcare professionals in to inspire us to do more, to make it better for each of you. So thank you. What a powerful panel. Please join me in another round of applause for this afternoon's speaker. Every one of us has our own unique journey. There are so many people along the way that impact our journey, and we each have an opportunity to influence someone else's journey. Today here at this conference, we hope you leave this session with a renewed determination to find your own personal hope in your journey. Enjoy your afternoon sessions. You won't want to miss the awards dinner tonight from 5:30 to 6:30, where we will recognize members of the community who have made a significant impact. Thank you.